LyciaStudio is equipped with a powerful debugging tool which allows going through the program step by step, pausing it at the necessary breakpoint in order to study its current state, tracking variables and expressions. There are two basic ways to launch a program in a debugging mode: from the context menu of the necessary program and by pressing the debug button in the main toolbar. You can also use these options to get to debug configurations for all programs once launched and debugged. You can launch the previous configuration from the main toolbar, from the menu bar by going to Run Debug History, or by pressing F11 on your keyboard. After you launch a program in the debug mode, its debug configurations are saved automatically to your workspace. The simplest possible option to run an application in the debug mode is from its context menu in 4GL view. You can also start debugging your applications by going to the Run menu group and choosing Debug as. You can choose and debug one of the already processed applications by selecting the Debug History option or the Run menu group in the debug view. Toolbars in both 4GL view and debug view have the debug button by pressing which you can start debugging your applications. To get to the debug configurations, you have to press Debug button in the main toolbar, go to Debug As and choose Debug Configurations. In the opened window, you can see the list of the debugged applications, their arguments and clients used for debugging. You can define a breakpoint by double-clicking the left margin of the necessary line or choosing Toggle Breakpoint from the right-click context menu of the same margin. To remove the breakpoint, double-click it once more or choose Toggle Breakpoint. To disable a breakpoint without removing it, choose Disable in the context menu or the breakpoint. Auto-refresh statement specifies how often the screen refreshes when the program runs. For debugging reasons, the third option is recommended because it will allow the user to see all the updates. However, it reduces performance significantly, so you should return to the default option when debugging is over. When debugging, you can get a warning that a source is not found. This message means that the debugger has encountered an empty line or processes something which is not your source code, like a built-in function. You can move to and select the piece of code with the breakpoint by clicking the small green box at its right margin. As Lycia web server as a whole has certain timeouts set, these timeouts spread upon the debugger as well. This means that if you leave your debugging session unattended for a certain time, the program will terminate because of the timeout and you will have to restart the debugging session. In the code editor, breakpoints are shown as small circles at the left margin of the necessary line. Here is our first breakpoint. All the breakpoints set for a 4GL program are also shown in the Breakpoints panel. As soon as you add a breakpoint by double-clicking the margin, for example, it appears in the Breakpoints panel. You can add and remove breakpoints by choosing Toggle Breakpoint in the context menu. Breakpoints can be enabled and disabled both in the Breakpoints panel and by choosing Enable or Disable Breakpoint in the context menu. If you press a small green box here, you will move back to the point where the debugger was suspended. This line is empty, so when the debugger moves to it, you will get a warning saying that it cannot be processed. You just move on. Here, the auto refresh is set to 3 in order to allow the user to see all the updates immediately on the screen. Special built-in variables in flag here, for example, get a special icon in the variables panel and can be filtered by the corresponding filter. Their value is changed when you press cancel here, that is when you cancel user interaction. In the variables panel, you can view and change all the variables of the current scope. All recently changed variables get yellow background. When changing variables of char and date data type, you have to use quotation marks. Special built-in variables change from false to true after you press cancel when running the program in the debug mode. You can use filter buttons to display only variables of your current interest. All variables displayed in the variables panel have their specific icon, including these global and module variables. Variables which were changed at the previous stage of debugging are shown with yellow background. When application is an input, you can change variable values at runtime. As you can see now, all 3 variables changed in the variables panel as well. You can also easily change values of the necessary variables in the variables panel. Don't forget quotation marks when changing char and date variables. Once changed in the variables panel, variable values change in runtime as well. Only local variables are shown all the time, regardless of whether the filters are on or off. All of the variables are displayed only when the corresponding filter is switched on. From the context menu here, you can also find the necessary variable by its name. When debugging your programs, you can navigate through the process by the corresponding toolbar buttons or certain functional buttons. Navigation buttons are disabled when the server waits for a client-side interaction like input or prompt. Use Step Enter or F5 to move to the next line. Use Suspend to hold off the debugging procedure and enable user interaction. Step Into, Step Over, and Step Return are the buttons you can use to navigate through your application when it is debugged. Use Step Into to go through the application line by line. You will get the corresponding message if the line is empty or cannot be processed by the debugger. After you have thoroughly examined the lines of your interest, press Resume to return to automatic debugging. Three basic navigation buttons are disabled when the application waits for user interaction and come active after it is over. After function call, Step Into sends debugger into the function and it will leave the function only after every line is debugged. Use Step Over if you don't want to go into the function. Step Return sends the debugger out of the function and into the program body. Suspend button allows holding off the debugging procedure. It is extremely useful, for example, with potentially infinite loops when you have to change the initial variable values to go out of the loop. If you have after field statement in your 4GL program, you can get to it by suspending the application, choosing the necessary field, and then resuming it again. Press Terminate to stop debugging. You can introduce conditions which will influence the way how the breakpoints will be processed by the debugger. You can use hit count to specify the number of loops after which the program will leave for or while loops and move on. Conditional breakpoints are processed anyway regardless of the results you want to obtain at a certain point of your program execution. Conditional breakpoints are processed only if their condition is fulfilled, otherwise they are ignored as if they were disabled. The first breakpoint in this program is unconditional. As you can see, the first breakpoint is set for initializing a dynamic array. This is how variables of the dynamic array data type are shown in the Variables panel. This breakpoint is a conditional one. As you can see from its properties, the debugger will suspend if the joker variable is equal to 95. This breakpoint is set for the loop which will be repeated 200 times. To see what happens with the application after the 50th iteration, we set the conditional breakpoint with the hit point condition. You can use the Expressions panel to check whether all the expressions existing in your code were calculated properly. In case you have any expressions in your source code, you can use the debugger to check whether they are calculated properly. This loop manipulates the global scope variable by setting it to the loop control value. At the first breakpoint, glin2 is equal to 400, so the first expression is true. At the second breakpoint, glin2 is equal to 666, thus the value of the second expression has changed from false to true. You can see all the breakpoints in the Breakpoints panel, both conditional and unconditional ones, as well as all the expressions regardless of their type are shown in the Expressions panel once you have added them. Lycia comes with a fully interactive graphical debugger, which allows debugging applications in a graphical environment, viewing and changing variable values and expressions using static and conditional breakpoints. Thank you for watching this video. For more information, please contact us on queryx.com or via info@queryx.com.